Captain Elise Monroe didn't hear the warning. She felt it. Something was wrong. The desert airspace was too quiet. No radio checks. No AWACS call-ins. No chatter from nearby patrols. Just a low hum in her cockpit and the distant growl of engines that weren't hers. She glanced at her radar. 2 contacts. Fast. Low. Closing in from the northeast. F-16s. They weren't supposed to be in her sector. She toggled her comms. Tiger 1 requesting confirmation on unknowns. Sector Delta 3. Approaching fast. Static. She tried again. Nothing. The icons on her HUD flickered for a second. A brief signal, jammed, and then dead. No command link. No satellite relay. Her A-10's comms had gone dark mid-air, mid-patrol. And now 2 fighter jets were on her wing. They slid in like sharks, silent and sharp, boxing her in from both sides. Elise narrowed her eyes, tapped her canopy glass. One of the F-16s tilted its wing gently, just enough to show the underbelly hardpoints. Armed. Locked in. Then it banked slightly, showing a signal with its wingtip. Land. Now. Her pulse climbed. She kept her hand steady on the stick. Flicked her transponder again. No response. Not even the emergency beacon was getting through. This wasn't a glitch. It was deliberate. She was being silenced in the air. Elise looked down at her map. There was only one stretch of flat land in visual range. An old Cold War airstrip. No tower. No personnel. Barely long enough for her to put the Warthog down without skidding. She had 2 options. Keep flying and risk escalation. Or land and find out what the hell was going on. She looked left at the lead F-16. No visible expression behind the tinted helmet visor. Just a stillness that made her skin crawl. They weren't here to rescue. They weren't here to escort. They were sent to end this flight. She exhaled slowly and throttled down. The A-10 responded with a tired groan as it descended. Wind buffeted the wings as she dropped altitude. Nose pointed toward cracked pavement and sun-scorched ground. The F-16s followed her down like shadows. As her wheels touched down, the tires screeched against the tarmac. Dust exploded outward, clouding the narrow runway. Her plane bounced once, then settled with a hard jolt. She pulled the throttle back and eased to a stop, engine still whirring, heart pounding louder than the turbines. Still no comms. Still no voices. She opened her canopy. Heat blasted her face. The smell of oil and sand filled her lungs. She climbed out slowly, boots hitting the concrete. Silence. No welcoming crew. No guards. No transport waiting. She scanned the airstrip. Empty. No movement. No structures intact. Just a fence half buried in sand and a few twisted antennae sticking out of a collapsed comms tower. Then she heard them. The faint roar of jet engines circling above. She looked up. The 2 F-16s were still there, still hovering overhead. But they weren't preparing to land. They weren't moving at all. They were staring. Or rather, the pilots were staring at something. Elise turned her head and followed their line of sight. They weren't watching her. They were looking at the back of her aircraft. Her A-10's tail number. AF-78 to 1986. She froze. And in that moment, so did they. No one spoke. No one moved. Because anyone who had spent time in this airspace knew exactly what that number meant. And they knew who it used to belong to. The silence dragged longer than it should have. Elise stood next to her aircraft, one boot resting on the metal ladder, eyes fixed on the jets above. They weren't leaving. They weren't landing. They just hovered, slowly circling, slower than any holding pattern she'd seen before. Like they were unsure what to do next. Like the sight of that tail number had broken their orders. She took a step forward. Still nothing. The wind kicked up dust across the airstrip, and the heat shimmered off the cracked concrete. Her flight suit was already baking. The sun glared down without mercy, and sweat traced a slow path down her back. But her attention never left those aircraft. Something had changed. Something those pilots saw that made them hesitate. She walked around the nose of the Warthog and looked up again. Her tail number came into view, old, faded, but unmistakable. AF-78 to 1986. She'd had it restored piece by piece. Not for nostalgia, not for attention, but because the aircraft had been lost with her mother. And when it resurfaced, buried in forgotten storage in Arizona, Elise fought to bring it back. They gave it to her. Quietly. Off the books. Nobody expected her to fly it. Nobody told her not to. Until now. She turned back to the cockpit. The screens were still dark. Comms still down. Her portable beacon was active, but showed no signal received. It was like she'd fallen off the map. Exactly what someone wanted. Her instincts were screaming. This wasn't just interference. This wasn't a random system failure. The F-16s weren't a coincidence. She had been deliberately cut off. She checked the horizon. Still no movement. Still no vehicles, no command truck, no personnel sweeping the area. She was alone. And whoever sent those jets didn't expect her to come down in one piece. Elise stepped back and looked at the sky again. The F-16s finally peeled away from their hold. They split apart slowly, turning westward, then vanished behind a line of distant hills. She didn't relax. She didn't trust it. No transmission. No flight logs. No escort home. They hadn't followed orders. They had seen something, recognized it, and disengaged. That wasn't standard procedure. And it definitely wasn't good news. Elise climbed back into her cockpit and checked the auxiliary systems. Her hands moved fast, flipping switches, scanning dials. No uplink. No GPS. Just internal power and dead air. Then she noticed something else. A blinking red light on her NAV history. The last waypoint in her system had been altered. A coordinate she didn't enter. Logged automatically. Timestamped 20 minutes before she lost comms. She expanded the data. It wasn't from her current patrol. It was old. Years old. And the coordinates? They matched the classified location her mother's last transmission had come from. The one the Air Force had sealed. The one Elise was never supposed to see. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't just about her aircraft or her patrol route. This was about what her mother found before she died. And someone knew Elise was getting too close. She leaned back in her seat, the canopy still open, heat pressing in. She wasn't just isolated. She was being watched. Silently. Closely. And someone out there was making decisions. Not about what she knew, but about whether she'd get the chance to say it out loud.
The airstrip didn't make sense. Elise had landed on dozens like it, remote, silent, forgotten. But this one felt different. Too clean. Too stripped down. No rusted equipment. No debris. No signs of weather damage. As if someone had prepared it for exactly one thing. A single landing. Hers. She stepped away from the Warthog, eyes scanning every corner. Her boots crunched lightly on loose gravel, but the air was still. The wind had died. Even the heat seemed to hold its breath. She moved toward the collapsed tower on the edge of the field. It looked like it had been destroyed decades ago, but the antenna array had fresh bolts. Fresh welding marks. Someone had tampered with it recently. This wasn't a graveyard. It was a trap. She kept her hand near her holster, eyes tracking the distance. Still no vehicles. Still no footprints. No camera towers. No drones. But she knew better. She wasn't alone. She never had been. She turned sharply, scanning the ridge behind the hangars. Nothing. Just dry brush and hills that swallowed the light. But she could feel it, that quiet weight that meant eyes were watching. She circled back to the Warthog and looked up at the tail again. AF-78 to 1986. She had read the old records. Memorized them, really. Her mother's final mission had disappeared into bureaucratic fog. Dozens of FOIA requests turned up the same thing. Heavily redacted reports, unexplained route changes, and a missing black box. The official story was short. Hostile territory. Unknown fire. No recovery. But even at age 12, Elise hadn't believed it. Now she had proof something had been covered up. A locked coordinate in her NAV system. An unlogged transmission bouncing off legacy satellites. An F-16 pilots sent to silence her, until they saw the number on her tail. That part still burned in her mind. They hadn't fired. They hadn't spoken. They had just looked at her aircraft and gone quiet. That silence said everything. She looked up again, scanning the sky. The F-16s were gone now, no vapor trails, no distant engine hum. She was well and truly cut off. And yet something tugged at her. That single altered coordinate hadn't been random. It was a breadcrumb. A message buried in an old system, waiting to be discovered. But why now? She climbed back into her cockpit and powered up the navigation logs again. The altered coordinate flickered, still active. It pointed farther south, into territory no longer marked on active Air Force maps. Restricted. Sealed. Off limits. She tapped the screen. The route plotted cleanly. Her internal system recognized it as valid, which meant someone on the inside had left it for her. Not a warning. An invitation. Her fuel was low, but manageable. If she took a direct route, she could reach the location and circle back to a known base before dark. It would be tight. Risky. But so was staying here. She paused, glancing once more at the old airstrip. Too clean. Too quiet. Too convenient. Someone wanted her grounded. But her mother had taught her one thing that mattered more than protocol. If it doesn't feel right, it isn't. Elise secured her harness and dropped the canopy. The Warthog's engine spun up with a low roar, slow and steady, like it knew it was time to move again. She taxied to the far end of the runway. No tower gave her clearance. No satellites tracked her takeoff. She was off the grid now, just like her mother had been. And whatever was waiting at those coordinates, Elise was going to find it. The terrain below turned from dust to red rock as Elise followed the coordinates. Her fuel levels were dropping faster than expected. The altitude was low. Too low. But the route programmed into her system wouldn't let her climb. Whoever coded it knew what they were doing. They were guiding her through radar gaps. Old Cold War paths. Unofficial. Invisible. And not on any modern flight charts. She glanced at her auxiliary systems. Still no uplink. Still no signal. The Warthog was flying blind, but with purpose. She followed the coordinates to the foot of a jagged canyon. Wind buffeted the fuselage, turbulence bouncing her gently inside the cockpit. Below her was a stretch of desert so empty it looked like the end of the world. Then she saw it. A black dot. No lights. No movement. But unmistakably man-made. She circled once, keeping her distance. It was a hangar. Not military standard. Older. Half buried in red sand. But the steel doors were sealed. No obvious entrance. No markings. And no sign of life. Elise circled once more and began a slow descent. There was no official landing zone. She found a flat patch of earth wide enough for the Warthog's heavy wheels. Dust kicked up in huge clouds as the plane settled onto the ground. Engines whined down. Silence again. She climbed out and dropped to the desert floor. Heat hit her like a wall. But it wasn't just the sun. It was the stillness. Like even the air was afraid to move. She approached the hangar slowly. The steel doors were enormous. Reinforced. No visible locks or handles. But there was something welded to the side. An old keypad. Dust covered it. But beneath the grime, she saw it clearly. A serial plate. AF-78 to 1986. Her tail number. The keypad beeped when she touched it. She froze. No one should have known she was coming. No one should have known what aircraft she'd be flying. But the system recognized her. It beeped again, then slid open with a grinding metallic groan. Inside was darkness. Then low lights flickered on, dim yellow bulbs that buzzed overhead. She stepped inside. What she saw stopped her cold. 2 more A-10s. Covered in tarps. Identical tail numbers. AF-78 to 1986. She blinked. Looked again. No mistake. They weren't duplicates. They were variations. Modified airframes. Slightly different loadouts. No serials on the wings. Each one labeled with a call sign. Ghost 1. Ghost 2. And the last one, her mother's name. Dana Monroe. Elise stared, her breath caught in her throat. This wasn't storage. It was a staging ground. And these weren't just old aircraft. They were part of a program. One she'd never read about, never heard mentioned, never seen referenced in all her years of service. It had been erased, buried, but not forgotten. Someone had kept this place alive. Someone had sent her the coordinates. Someone had known exactly when she'd be close enough to see them. And someone had wanted her to find this. Because her mother's death hadn't been a loss in combat. It had been something else entirely. Elise took a slow step toward the aircraft with her mother's name. Paint chipped, wings covered in dust. But it looked like it could still fly. The canopy was sealed shut. But the hatch opened. Not electronically. Manually. Like it had been waiting. The manual hatch creaked open with the sound of metal long left untouched. Elise stepped back instinctively. Dust spilled out from the frame, catching the light as it swirled. She waited, but nothing moved inside. No sounds. No alarms. Just the silence of something sealed away for far too long. She climbed the small ladder and leaned inside. The cockpit was dark. Worn. But intact. Everything was still there. The old targeting screens. The analog switches. Even a flight manual tucked between the seat and the side panel, yellowed with age. Her heart skipped. This wasn't just her mother's aircraft. It was her last flight, frozen in time. She reached for the manual, pulled it out carefully. Pages stuck together from years of heat and dust. Inside the cover, scrawled in pen, was a single line. If anyone finds this, I didn't crash. I was grounded. Asterisk asterisk. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was Dana Monroe. Elise stared at the message. The air in her chest felt heavy. Her mother hadn't died in action. She had been silenced, contained, hidden away along with this hangar and its ghosts. And now Elise knew it wasn't an accident she'd been forced down. Someone had known her tail number. Someone had wanted this message found. She climbed down from the aircraft and looked around the hangar again. 3 planes. No power tools. No fuel lines. No active tech. But then she noticed something strange, an access panel in the wall behind the last Warthog. Hidden in plain sight. She walked toward it. The keypad was newer than the rest of the building. Still glowing. Still live. She stared at the numbers. No clues. No prompts. Then she thought of the one number that had followed her since childhood. 78. 1986. She entered it. The panel beeped once, then opened with a soft hiss. A steel door slid back, revealing a narrow hallway. Lights buzzed on, one by one, ahead of her. She followed. The passageway sloped downward. Cool air brushed her face, filtered clean. Not the stale desert air from above. At the end of the corridor was a heavy door, partially ajar. She pushed it gently. Inside was a small control room. Old monitors. Paper files stacked in gray metal cabinets. A faded map of the Middle East on the wall. And pinned above the console, her mother's service photo. Dana Monroe. Uniform crisp. Eyes sharp. Smile barely there. Next to it was a printed dossier. Project Silent Wing. She opened it. Top page. Classified markings. Her mother's name was listed under lead operative. Dates matched the final weeks before her supposed death. Mission objective: reconnaissance and long-range disruption over unstable airspace. Status: terminated. Cause: mission compromise. Then, handwritten across the page in thick black ink: do not release. Elise's hands tightened around the file. This wasn't just about silence. It was about erasure. Her mother had flown a mission so buried, even the Air Force had buried her with it. Not because of failure, but because of what she'd seen. Elise looked back toward the door. Whoever sent the signal had access to these files. To this facility. They knew she would follow the trail. But they hadn't shown themselves. Not yet. She wasn't done. She took one final look at the photo, then folded the dossier under her arm. If they had tried to erase Dana Monroe, they were about to learn her daughter could fly louder than any silence they'd left behind. The desert sun was beginning its slow descent, casting long shadows over the hidden hangar. Elise's mind raced as she tucked the dossier securely into her flight suit pocket. Every step she took echoed louder now, a reminder that the silence around her wasn't peace. It was waiting. She moved back through the narrow corridor, careful not to disturb the papers or the humming machinery. The weight of the secrets she carried pressed down on her like the heat outside. Whoever had built this secret base had gone to extraordinary lengths to hide the truth. And now, that truth was in her hands. Outside, the Warthogs waited silently. She glanced at her aircraft once more, her mother's ghost flying alongside hers. The thought stirred something fierce inside her. She wasn't just flying a plane, she was flying a legacy. Her comm still dead. No uplink. No friendly voices to break the isolation. But the silence was different now. It wasn't just a void. It was a challenge. Elise climbed into the cockpit and sealed the canopy. The familiar hum of the engine reassured her, steady and strong. She ran through the startup sequence, double-checked her fuel levels, and prepared for the next move. She punched in the coordinates embedded in the dossier. They led to a place even deeper into restricted airspace, a location that no pilot was ever supposed to see. But the path was clear, mapped out by someone who knew she would follow. She took a deep breath and pushed the throttle forward. The engines roared to life, lifting her off the cracked desert floor. The familiar vibration thrummed through the controls as she climbed toward the fading light. Her heart pounded, not just with fear, but with resolve. This flight was no longer just about survival. It was about uncovering what had been hidden for decades. Minutes stretched into an eternity as she navigated through the ghost airspace. No radar, no signals, just the endless sky and the promise of answers waiting somewhere ahead. Suddenly, a flicker on her HUD caught her eye, a blip far below near a ridge. It wasn't on any of her charts. Her pulse quickened. She banked gently, lowering altitude to get a better look. Nestled between rocky outcrops was an old airfield, even more derelict than the last. But there was movement, faint but unmistakable. A convoy of vehicles, armored and cautious, patrolled the area. Men in tactical gear moved with military precision. Not friendly, not welcoming. Elise's mind raced. Whoever had left the dossier here had more than secrets to protect. They had forces ready to guard them. Her comms crackled suddenly. A voice. Cold. Controlled. Captain Monroe. You shouldn't have come here. Elise's grip tightened on the stick. The voice was unfamiliar, but the authority was clear. Who is this? She demanded. There was a pause. Then the reply. Someone who knows the truth your mother uncovered. And someone who doesn't intend to let it see the light. Her mind flashed back to the dossier. The mission terminated, the cover-up, the erasure. This was bigger than she imagined. She toggled her comms again. If you're here to stop me, you'll have to do better than silence and threats. The line went dead. Her pulse was steady now. No panic. No second-guessing. Only one path forward. Elise adjusted her course and climbed higher, eyes fixed on the convoy below. She was flying into the eye of a storm. But she was no longer alone. Her mother's legacy flew with her. And she would not be grounded. Not this time. Elise tightened her grip on the controls, her eyes locked on the convoy below. The desert's fading light cast long shadows over the armored vehicles, making them look like beasts creeping through the rocky terrain. She knew she couldn't land here, not without being captured or worse. But she had to get closer, had to understand what this hidden force was guarding. Her comms stayed dead, silent except for the static. No backup, no allies, no friendly voices. Just her and the ghosts she chased. But something inside her had shifted. Fear had turned into focus. Confusion into clarity. She banked sharply, using the jagged cliffs to mask her approach. The Warthog responded like an extension of her body, steady, fierce, ready. Years of training surged through her muscles. Every instrument in the cockpit pulsed with life, and her mind ran scenarios faster than the jets she once flew alongside. The convoy was nearing a camouflaged bunker embedded into the side of a mountain. Black smoke curled from vents along its edge, and Elise could see armed guards patrolling the perimeter. Radar silence was no mistake. This place was off any official map, hidden in plain sight, just like the hangar with the ghost planes. Her mother's mission, her mother's death, it all connected here. The thought twisted her gut. What had Dana Monroe stumbled upon? What secret was worth erasing with such ruthlessness? Elise scanned the landscape below. There was no time to lose. She adjusted her altitude and swooped low over the compound, forcing the guards to scatter in alarm. Guns raised, radios scrambled, but none could reach her. The electronic warfare devices on board the Warthog blocked all signals from tracking her. For a moment, she felt untouchable. Then her comms crackled again, a distorted voice slicing through the static. "Captain Monroe, this is your final warning. Leave this airspace now, or we will engage." Elise's eyes narrowed. "I'm not leaving until I know what happened to my mother." Silence. Then a click. The voice returned, softer but no less cold. "Your mother was a threat. She saw something classified. Something the government buried to protect lives. Lives you don't know about. If you push further, you'll be destroyed. Just like her." The words hit hard, but Elise refused to flinch. "I don't believe in buried truths. Not when I'm flying this legacy. I'm coming in." The line went dead. Her fuel was dangerously low, but she didn't care. She flew straight toward the bunker, circling the area to identify entry points. There, a small maintenance hatch, half hidden under rocks. She could land a small craft there. Her mind raced for a plan. She knew stealth was her only advantage. No weapons, no backup, just her will and the memory of a mother she never stopped believing in. She made her decision. The Warthog was too large to land here safely, but she could call in a remote drone, one she had hidden under the seat for emergencies. She flipped the switch, activating the small drone stored in the rear compartment. The drone launched silently, camera streaming live feed to her HUD. She guided it toward the bunker's entrance, watching for patrols and weak points. The drone revealed a guard shifting duty near the hatch. Elise memorized the pattern. A narrow window just seconds long. She took a deep breath, setting the drone to distract the guards with a flare on the opposite side of the compound. The guards rushed to investigate, leaving the hatch momentarily unguarded. Without hesitation, Elise brought the drone closer and triggered the hatch's manual release from the inside. The door hissed open. Her heart pounded. This was it, the next step in a journey she never wanted to take but knew she had to. Elise glanced at the live feed one last time, then whispered to herself, "For you, Mom. I'm coming home." Elise slipped through the hatch as quietly as she could. The air inside was cool and smelled faintly of metal and oil, an underground fortress carved from rock and secrecy. Her eyes adjusted to the dim light flickering from old fluorescent bulbs overhead. She moved slowly, every sound magnified in the stillness, her boots barely making a whisper against the concrete floor. The drone's live feed displayed ahead, giving her a bird's-eye view of the winding corridors. Elise checked her gear and kept her hand close to her sidearm, knowing she wasn't alone in this labyrinth. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. She rounded a corner and spotted a heavy door marked control room. The faded paint hinted at years of neglect, but the electronic lock was new, pulsing faintly, still active. Elise pulled the dossier from her pocket and scanned the contents again, searching for any clues. Then she remembered the data chip hidden in the back of the manual she'd found earlier. With a quick flick, she connected the chip to a small port beside the lock. The screen blinked, hummed, and then the lock clicked open. The door slid aside, revealing a room lined with consoles and monitors. Screens displayed static interspersed with grainy images of classified locations: airfields, troop movements, satellite feeds. But her eyes caught the one in the center, a paused video clip of her mother. Dana Monroe, alive and focused, speaking with a group of shadowy figures in a secret meeting. Elise's breath caught. She pressed play. Dana's voice was steady, discussing a covert mission that had uncovered an international arms smuggling ring using unauthorized military aircraft. The mission was so sensitive, it had been scrubbed from all official records. Her mother had been silenced because she threatened powerful interests. The video ended abruptly, replaced by a security alert flashing red across the monitors. The sound of boots echoed down the corridor. Elise's heart hammered. She wasn't alone. She ducked behind the console, clutching her sidearm tightly. Two men entered, dressed in tactical gear, weapons ready. "We've got an intruder," one said, scanning the room. Elise stayed still, her breath shallow. The men moved cautiously, but the drone hovering just outside the door emitted a loud beep. The guards turned toward the noise. Elise seized the moment, firing a warning shot that shattered a monitor. The men reacted, weapons raised, but she bolted toward the hallway. Adrenaline surged as she sprinted through the maze-like corridors, searching for an exit. Her mind raced. This was bigger than she imagined. The conspiracy stretched far beyond her mother's death. She found a service ladder leading up. She climbed fast, every muscle burning. The ladder ended in a trapdoor hidden beneath a pile of rocks. She pushed it open and burst into the fading desert light, gasping for air. The convoy below was in chaos, vehicles scattered, alarms blaring. Elise ran to the Warthog, heart pounding, eyes scanning the sky for threats. The engines roared to life as she climbed inside and sealed the canopy. She punched in the emergency takeoff sequence and lifted off just as gunfire echoed across the compound. The desert stretched wide beneath her, freedom and danger intertwined. As she climbed higher, she glanced once more at the secret bunker shrinking behind her. Her mother's legacy was no longer a ghost. It was a mission, a fight for truth and justice. And Elise Monroe was ready to finish what Dana had started.